Shall you join me? Join me for a walk down Nostalgia Lane. Hello, welcome to Alyssa Jean's Reviews. My name is Alyssa, and this is the latest edition of Nostalgia Lane, a monthly series in which I rewatch and review a film from my childhood. This edition from November 2021 will feature the film Clue from 1985, starring Christopher Lloyd, Michael McKean, Tim Curry, Madeline Khan, a whole bunch of other people who I'll talk about as I get more into this. So, as usual, my Nostalgia Lane videos are broken down into 4 parts. In the first part, I will talk about briefly why I chose this film to review for Nostalgia Lane. Then part 2, I will talk about what I thought about the film when I first saw it, usually as a kid. In this case, I was probably about 12 when I first saw it. And then part 3, I will talk about what I thought of it now in the rewatch compared to what I thought of it back then. And then in part 4, that's when I will give my rating out of 10 as I view it now, not as I viewed it back then. Most of these films were probably a 10 when I first saw it. I'm not sure if I would call Clue a 10 back then. Probably would have. Most of them would have been a 10 back then, but the rating I'm going to give in this video is the rating after my rewatch, how I view it now as an adult. So with all that out of the way, let's get into it. We'll start with why I chose this film for Nostalgia Lane. So like some of the other films that I chose, I was just going through one of my streaming services, in this case Paramount Plus, and saw that the film was there for viewing and thought, God damn, I haven't seen that in so long. It's probably been, I'd say, at least 30 years. Whereas when it was out, I'd say in the late 80s, maybe even a little bit in the early 90s, it was yet another one of those films that my brothers and I watched over and over and over and over and over on VHS. And unlike any of the other films, though, I actually never saw this in the movie theater. I saw it for the first time when it came out on cable, and then we taped it and then just watched it over and over and over. And that is the first time I ever saw it. I never saw it in the theater, but I saw it gazillions of times on VHS tape through the years, like about a 4 or 5 year period. And that actually comes into play later on. That's kind of important, which I'll explain a little bit later. Alright, so now let's move on over to part 2. Okay, so let us get into what I thought about this film when I first saw it as a kid. And as I mentioned, I did not see it in the movie theaters when it was first released. And the reason for that is it was based off of a board game that I didn't really care about that much. I'm sure we had Clue in our house, but we didn't really like it. We didn't play it that much. Our household was more of a Monopoly family. We would play Monopoly a bunch. And Sorry probably would be another one. And honestly, checkers and chess probably would have been the other board games we would have played the most. Clue was just not a big one for me or for our family, really. So why would I go see a film in the movie theater about that? But we ended up watching it on cable, and then as we do with cable films, we taped it. And I don't know why we ended up watching the cable, just probably because it was there. I think we just watched everything that came on cable back in the 80s. And so we ended up watching it and loved it, and ended up watching it again and then again and again and again and again and again. And it helped me appreciate the game a little bit more. And then I wanted to play the game. I still didn't end up liking the game, but I wanted to like the game because the movie was so good. And dare I say, the best film based off of a board game ever made? What would be another one? Jumanji? I don't know. I think so. But in any case, I think what we were drawn to then was the comedy. We just thought it was freaking hilarious. And it had an all-star comedy cast, or what would have been considered an all-star comedy cast at the time. Today, you look at that cast and it's like a VH1 Where Are They Now episode. Like, where are most of these people? In fact, I thought, I remember Martin Mull passing away, and then I looked him up on Wikipedia. He's still alive. So, Martin Mull was one of them. I remember he used to be in all these commercials. He was a comedian. He was fairly well known in the 80s. Another actor in this film is Michael McKean, who at the time was the guy from Laverne and Shirley, as far as I knew. He also probably would have already been in Spinal Tap at this point, but I hadn't seen Spinal Tap at that point. So he was the guy from Laverne and Shirley. And then Christopher Lloyd, fresh off of his superstardom and Back to the Future, although I don't know the order of which of those two films was released first. They were both released in 1985. As far as I knew, he was fresh off of Back to the Future because I saw Back to the Future in the theaters in 85 and saw Clue on cable in probably 86. So I definitely knew Christopher Lloyd from Back to the Future first. And as I mentioned in my Back to the Future Nostalgia Lane video, that movie is the one that put Christopher Lloyd on the map for me. But he was fresh in my head for this film. And then there's Eileen Brennan, who I knew as that lady from Private Benjamin, which I still know her as the Private Benjamin and Clue. Those are really the only two things I've ever seen her in. And who else was in this film? Leslie Ann Warren, who was fairly well known in the 80s, although I used to always get her confused with Susan Sarandon. I was like, wait, wasn't that the lady from Bull Durham? No. Susan Sarandon. I always got them confused. She's another one who seems to have dropped off the face of the earth. And Madeline Khan, another one who seems to have dropped off the face of the earth. She would be pretty old by now. Madeline Khan, I looked up her list of credits just now, film credits. I'm trying to think where I would have seen her before Clue, and the most likely suspect would have been the Muppet movie. She was in the Muppet movie, and a whole bunch of other things I wouldn't have watched as a kid. But she was fairly well known at the time. And then, of course, there is the incredible, amazing Tim Curry. So there's a saying, there are two types of people in this world. People who look at Tim Curry and think of Rocky Horror Picture Show, and people who look at Tim Curry and think of Clue. I feel like that second group that I just mentioned is vastly the minority of people, but I am very firmly in that group. Never cared for Rocky Horror Picture Show, just any sort of musical at all. I've just never been a musical type of person, no matter what. And I know that I'm going to get all these comments, oh, you gotta see the Rocky Horror Picture. No, people have been saying that to me for 40 years. I'm not going to see it. I'm not going to go to one of the productions at the theater down the street. Portland actually has a really famous production of it every week, and they've had it for years. I don't care. I'm not interested. Please don't write in the comments that I must go see it. I don't care. Tim Curry is from Clue. God damn it. And he is really the one who sold this film. The scene at the end, toward the end, when he's trying to put together the murder, and he's running around going and trying to recreate everything, and he's imitating all of the things that the other people have done, and Mrs. Peacock screams, and then Mr. Green slaps her. I had to get her to stop. Tim Curry doing these imitations of all the other characters as he is recounting everything that happened during the evening was just always one of my favorite parts. It was just so good. And then he simulates the murder of the cook, goes through the secret door and goes into the kitchen, so that when Mr. Green opens the door, he falls out, and everybody screams, and then he lays on the floor. And so, by the way, so next thing that happened was, and it's just, the timing was just so perfect. So Tim Curry, I always thought was amazing in this movie, and actually, I just thought everybody was. So we could just watch it over and over and over again and just laugh at it. There were a lot of the kind of the more political things that were a little bit over my head back in the time. There's a joke about socialism, and they talk about communism. Communism is a red herring. So some of that was a little bit over my head when I was 12, but it didn't dampen my experience of it. And eventually I think I figured it out by the time I stopped watching it a million times. And my favorite part, actually, my favorite aspect of this film when I was a kid was the fact that it had 3 different endings. I thought that was great. Now, supposedly in the theater, I had always heard when you saw it in the theater, they only had one ending, and depending on which theater you went to, you would see a different ending. And I always thought, even back then, God, that would suck. I'm so glad I saw it for the first time on cable and then on VHS tape, because that would suck to only have one of those endings, particularly the first 2 endings, which don't make a lot of sense. So the first ending is Miss Scarlet is the murderer. The second ending is Miss Peacock is the murderer. And when you watch it on cable, between each take, it goes, that could have happened, but what about this? And the thing that I always had a hard time buying, even when I was a kid, was that in those 2 cases, they would have had to murder people that were Mr. Body's informants that they only knew about just because they looked at them in a photograph. And I had especially hard time buying the singing telegram girl who goes, I am your singing telegram, which, by the way, that little song used to always get in our head. But like Miss Scarlet or Mrs. Peacock would have looked at the photo of this girl once and like, oh, that's one of the informants, boom, and shoot her. Like, I have a hard time buying that. But those 2 endings were fine as long as you get the 3rd ending as well, which says, this is how it really happened, and this is the one that makes the most sense. So in the final ending, everybody is the murderer, except for Mr. Green, who turns out he's working for the FBI. In each of the endings, Howard Hessman, who had come to the door earlier, pretending to be, this Jesus guy or whatever, like preaching Armageddon, was actually working for the FBI. In the other endings, it was Wadsworth, Tim Curry's character, who works for the FBI. In the final ending, it's Mr. Green. And I thought that was such a great way to end the movie with that ending where everybody murdered somebody. In that case, it made a little more sense because at least they each murdered somebody that they knew. It was their personal informant, the one who had informed to Mr. Body on them. So it made more sense. It was still, I always found it a bit of a stretch, even back then, that all those people happened to come to the house. But you can buy that, okay, Wadsworth / Mr. Body, as it's revealed in the final ending, Tim Curry's character, who turns out to really be Mr. Body, he is the one who invited them all there. So, yeah, it made a little more sense. But I couldn't imagine going to see that in the theater and only seeing the Miss Scarlet or the Mrs. Peacock ending and not getting all 3 of them. And I always thought that from the beginning since I was a kid. And I was like, thank God I watched this on cable for the first time. And I still feel that way. Speaking of how I still feel, let's go ahead and switch over to part 3 so I can talk about some of my thoughts on my rewatch. So I have to admit, I really expected to not like this movie nearly as much as I did when I was a kid. I mean, I saw that it was on Paramount Plus, as I mentioned, and I was like, oh, that would be fun to revisit that. It's been so long. But I thought, I bet it's not nearly as funny as it used to be because I was younger, a preteen, 12, 13, 14, probably when I was watching it the most. And so probably my sense of humor has changed, and I probably don't think it's anywhere near as funny. I probably think it sucks now. These are thoughts going through my head. And also, I do recall some kind of gay jokes about Mr. Green, because the thing he was being blackmailed was that he was a homosexual. And at that time, I was still kind of really learning what it meant to be homosexual. I didn't have any idea what it meant to be trans, as I talked about in some of my other videos, where I talk about my struggling with my trans identity. But it was only beginning to even learn what it meant to be gay, because it just was not anywhere in the media, anywhere. So I only had vague memories of that, so I thought maybe that could look pretty homophobic now. But what it turned out on my rewatch, first of all, the humor stands. I love it every bit as much as I did when I was a kid. In fact, I can appreciate it on a deeper level, which I'll get into in a minute. Now, as for the possible homophobia and the jokes about Mr. Green being gay, I don't love it, but it's not as bad as I feared it might be. Definitely, just being gay was something that, if it was presented in the media at all, it was usually made fun of. They don't actually do too bad of a job in this film with it. I am bothered by the scene at the end and the final ending where Mr. Green, who turns out was not gay at all the whole time, he was really the FBI agent, he goes, "I'm going to go home and sleep with my wife." And I did actually find that funny back then. Now it kind of, it's a little bit cringy because it just kind of, it's giving the message that being gay is bad. That if you're a real man, you're going to go home and sleep with your wife. And that's not great. But it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. And for the time, it's all right. I was actually expecting it to be even worse. Now, as for the humor, I really can appreciate it on a deeper level. The whole Tim Curry bit that I just talked about, I appreciate it even more now. I'm just watching this like I'm watching an artist at work, watching Tim Curry run around the hallway. He was just masterful in a very comedic role, but the comedic timing from him and every single actor all throughout the film is spot on. There's a lot of dialogue that reminds me a lot of that Airplane type of humor, like in the movie Airplane, which I hadn't seen yet when I first saw Clue, I don't think, or maybe, I don't remember what the timeline would have been. Might have been around the same time. But in any case, and Airplane, where they have the line like, hospital? What is it? It's a big building full of patients, but that's not important right now. And then they move on to the next line, like nothing ridiculous was just said. And Clue does that a lot, masterfully. I wish I could think of more examples. The one that's stuck in my head is when Wadsworth Tim Curry is introducing all of the different people and why they're being blackmailed, and he's talking about Professor Plum, who's Christopher Lloyd, and he's like, he used to be a psychologist for psychopaths and lunatics, and then Christopher Lloyd says, "Now I work for the UN." "So you haven't changed jobs?" And then another thing, and it's one of those things that like he just moves on, and it's one of those things that's just like it takes a second for the joke to go. The joke goes like, oh, he just implied that people at the UN are lunatics. That's not even the funniest one. I wish that wasn't the first example I thought of. But that's just an example of just the type of humor, just saying these ridiculous things in a very deadpan way and then just moving on quickly to the next thing. And just the comedic timing is so brilliant all throughout this. There's a lot of just great back and forths. There's a back and forth between Colonel Mustard and Wadsworth, which is Martin Mull, and Tim Curry at one point when it's a very like Abbott and Costello type of routine, a very Who's on First type of routine, but it's just brilliantly done. I don't know that I would watch a movie now and see this kind of humor and love it, but since I loved it so much as a kid, I'm able to watch this film now and just appreciate the genius behind it. Just what a masterpiece of comedy it actually is. I'm just watching it in awe, like just how good everyone in this film really is. And of course, my opinion on the endings really has not changed at all. I feel the exact same way as I did when I was a kid. That this would not have been good with only the Miss Peacock or Miss Scarlet ending. I need all three. And I love how in each of the endings, like they kind of bring in some of the same lines, but they're said by different people. They're said differently, and I appreciated that as a kid too, actually. But I'm just sitting back here and just really appreciating what a masterpiece of comedy this is. And that is not the reaction I thought I would have on my rewatch. I thought I would watch it and go like, yeah, this is a little kid humor, this is preteen humor, this is not that good. But that's not at all the case. And especially since, as I said, a lot of the actors are, I don't want to call them has-beens, that sounds mean, but they're not in the limelight anymore, most of them. Most of them have disappeared years ago. So I was thinking, yeah, it's probably not that good. But they're all amazing in this film. Every single person who's in this movie. It's just one of the best ensemble comedy films I've ever seen. And it still is today. It's one of the best ensemble comedy films. So good. Okay, so now I will give my rating out of 10. With 1 being the lowest possible score and 10 being the highest possible score. And I'm basing this rating off of my rewatch. As I said, it was most likely a 10 back in the day. So after my rewatch of Clue, my rating for this film is now a 9. I can't believe it. I thought I was going to think it's like a 6 or something after my rewatch. And I watch it, I'm like, this is still really good. Not quite a 10 anymore. It does lose a little bit with age, especially with the borderline homophobic stuff that they did touch on a little bit. And as I said, I wouldn't necessarily seek out this style of comedy now as an adult, but I can appreciate it for what it is, since it was a film that I have nostalgia with. I can just appreciate just how masterful it was done and just how well everyone is in this movie. They're all just amazing. So yeah, much to my surprise, this is still a 9. This is a 9. I can't believe it. Okay, so that wraps up this edition of Nostalgia Lane. Please join me in December for my next edition of Nostalgia Lane. And that edition, I'm going to revisit something way back from when I was, I think, 8 years old. This was my greatest favorite movie of all time when I was between the ages of like 8 and 10, besides Star Wars. This is Superman 2, starring Christopher Reeves. Superman 2 is the one where the 3 villains from Krypton come in, and I just was always blown away by Superman going up against 3 villains who all have his powers. So this is how I'm going to do it, though. I can't rewatch Superman 2 without rewatching the first Superman, so I'm going to rewatch Superman the movie, which was the 1979 film, and then rewatch Superman 2. My plan right now is to just review Superman 2, because that is the film I had the most nostalgia around. Superman 1 was like, it was fine, but I didn't think it was like the greatest thing ever, like I thought Superman 2 was. So Superman 2 is my target. But if I rewatch them both, and I feel I have a lot to say about the first Superman movie as well, maybe I'll end up rolling them together and end up doing a double feature type of review. We'll see. So you'll just have to wait and see next month. But at the very least, I will be reviewing Superman 2, starring Christopher Reeves. I can't wait to rewatch these movies. It's going to be a lot of fun. This is truly digging into my childhood. Clue is like preteen. This is like childhood. So Anyway, that does it for this edition of Nostalgia Lane. If you have not already, please subscribe. And I always forget to mention this piece of it at the very end when I have my little credits, and there'll be 3 different videos you can click on the lower right. There will be a little subscribe button. You can just click on that and subscribe instantly. You don't even have to stop playing the video to subscribe. So please do that. Check out all my other stuff on the MCU, Star Wars, Star Trek. I'm revealing the Wheel of Time right now, so just check out all that stuff. And I will see you soon. Bye-bye.